Season 24 of Doctor Who feels very much like a transitional period. None of the stories are all-time classics. Some are downright terrible, but there's a whole fresh new energy to it that sets it apart from what came before. Delta and the Bannermen is a fun watch. There's a lot wrong with it, but there's also plenty of good ideas. So it's a good example of the season as a whole. Part 1 is by far the best, cut in between a bunch of disparate storylines in rapid succession. There's a big action scene to start, as Bannermen fight Shimmeran soldiers in a suspiciously familiar quarry. It could be the same one as Time and the Rani, but with a different coloured sky. The bright green Shimmerans look a bit silly, but there's plenty of action, as Delta barely escapes with her life. Belinda Main is rather restrained in the role. She doesn't have much backstory other than the Bannermen want to kill her, and she's still working. She was in the last Wonder Woman movie, so she's possibly the only actor who's ever appeared with both Pedro Pascal and Ken Dodd. Speaking of Ken Dodd, his performance as the Tollmaster is a lot of fun. He's clearly just playing himself, but that's why he was hired, and it's only a small cameo, so it doesn't hurt the show too much. The whole scene is played for laughs, with the space tourists starting out as ridiculous blobby aliens before transforming into humans. It's basically the same idea as Voyage of the Damned in 2007. At the same time, we also get the adventures of CIA agents Weismuller and Hawk, played by Stubby Kaye and Morgan Deere. Stubby Kaye has been in all sorts of films, from Guys and Dolls to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but sadly that doesn't come through in his performance. The characters are just hopelessly cliched Americans, played extremely broadly. They always feel fake, even though they really aren't. Delta hops on the tourist bus, and they all end up stuck in Wales in 1959. The whole story is steeped in 50s nostalgia, as were most of the 1980s, to be fair. There was Grease and then Showaddy Waddy, and through most of the decade, the BBC had a sitcom called Hardy High, which was also set in the 1950s, and that was clearly an influence on this story. The music is also notable, apart from the usual electronic dirges. There's also cover versions of classic songs from the 50s in there as well. They're not terribly appropriate most of the time, but at least it's something a bit different. The period setting works well here. The camp looks authentic and is packed with campers in 50s gear. Billy the mechanic is played by David Kinder and is instantly smitten by Delta, even though they never actually talk in part 1. Their romance is never massively convincing, as it mostly happens off screen, and it's a major plot point, so it really deserves more screen time. Billy's friend Ray, played by Sarah Griffiths, was positioned as a backup companion in case Ace didn't work out. Her Welsh accent is a little broad, but she has a decent personality, handy with a motorbike and toolkit, and unlucky in love. If she had continued in the role, she would probably have been a step up from Mel and Perry. Part 1 ends on a dual cliffhanger, as Delta's egg hatches, and Mel screams her head off as a hideous green baby emerges, while the Doctor and Ray are menaced by one of the flying pickets. The resolution to both of these is a little anticlimactic, but it all kicks off later on as the Bannermen arrive and blow up the bus full of space tourists. It's quite a shock, as you don't usually expect innocent people to meet that kind of fate, but it does demonstrate that the Bannermen are worth taking seriously. Their leader is Gavrock, played by Don Henderson. He's very good at playing bad guys and clearly enjoys himself, barking out orders to his troops and eating what seems like a massive haunch of ham. The Doctor's confrontation with him at the end of part 2 is a strong scene for McCoy. He has sadly gone back to using the mixed up sayings that I thought were a one-off in Time and the Rani, but this scene shows that he can deliver serious lines as well, such as when he says, "Life? What do you know about life, Gavrock? You yelling death. Lies, treachery and murder are your currency. You promise life, but in the end it will be life which defeats you." Sadly, that's about as good as it gets. For the rest of the story, there's just lots of endless motorbike rides through the Welsh countryside, Billy and Delta courting while the baby gets older and older, and slapstick scenes like the Bannermen getting covered in honey. We do get the character of Gronwy, played by Hugh Lloyd. He's a very enigmatic beekeeper. Some have speculated that he could be a Time Lord, or even a future version of the Doctor. But the Doctor doesn't seem to recognise him, so it's hard to say. Eventually, the Bannermen are destroyed by a shriek from the child projected over the camp's tannoy system, which feels like a bit of an anticlimax, and Billy transforms himself into an alien so he can restart the Shimmeran race. But they're never heard from again, so it's entirely possible he just killed himself. It all feels a bit rushed, possibly because it's only 3 parts instead of 4. But there's a lot going on at the start and not much by the end, so it's very uneven as a whole. The DVD has about an hour of special features. The proper making of is only on the Blu-ray. There's a 6-minute location feature with Sylvester McCoy talking about how he loved a particular rock in Star Trek. Bonnie Langford is as enthusiastic as ever, and Ken Dodd talks about how much he loves science fiction. So I'd like to think that if he lived, he might have been a subscriber to this channel. There's also 45 minutes of footage they shot for it, so you get to see the full versions of the interviews, and also behind the scenes of them filming the toll booth scene, but it's all shot on film, so it looks much better than the actual episode. A brief Wales Today report has interviews with Sylvester McCoy, John Nathan Turner, and Stubby Kaye. Hugh Lloyd is interviewed about his career and his role in Doctor Who, shortly before his death. And there's a feature from one of Noel Edmonds' shows, where he puts the Doctor on trial, which is just an excuse to show some bloopers. Overall, it starts out really well, but the story is rather rushed, and it gets sillier and more cartoony as it goes along. I'll give it 5 out of 10. Next week, Dragonfire, the first story for one of my favourite companions, so I suspect I'm going to like it, even if it turns out to be rubbish. Press subscribe to find out what I think of it now, and I'll see you next time.